Do you believe in instant karma? In Dallas, a city known for its modernity and bustle, a scene that might seem like something out of an ordinary action movie has turned into something totally unexpected. Imagine an armed criminal, desperately fleeing from the police after a robbery, thinking that freedom was still within his grasp. He runs without looking back, believing that the chase will end right there at the next corner. But what happened next left everyone open-mouthed and became a real phenomenon on social networks. Have you ever been in a situation where everything seemed to be under control until a totally unusual twist happens? Stay with me until the end, because what you will discover now may surprise you in a way you never imagined. The escape of the criminal, who seemed to be at the height of his daring, turned out to be a trap in a way that no one could predict. He entered the area of an abandoned park, a place forgotten by the city, where silence and abandonment created an almost surreal atmosphere. Without realizing it, he passed under a tree that hid a huge nest of marimbondos, a presence that seemed harmless until that moment. But the vibration caused by the unbridled running of the suspect was enough to trigger an unexpected reaction. And what happened next? An explosion of angry marimbondos came out of hiding, forming a real cloud of poison and aggression against the man who, until then, had seemed invincible. The scene, which looked like something out of a comedy movie or a nightmare, was filmed by residents passing by and soon went viral on the internet. The image of the criminal, desperate trying to protect himself from the stings while dropping the weapon, was shared millions of times and became a symbol of an instant karma that no one can explain. The police, who watched everything, could not help but be impressed by the force of nature acting so directly and ruthlessly. But what does this story teach us? How can a simple race for freedom end with someone being beaten by a cloud of enraged faggots? Stay with me, because this story does not end here, and the denouement will leave you even more intrigued. Let's continue to explore this incredible episode, which shows that sometimes nature has a very peculiar way of collecting its debts. If you found this story unbelievable, just imagine how nature has its own ways of teaching lessons that no one expects. What began as a desperate escape turned into a true spectacle of natural punishment, showing that sometimes the universe acts in ways that are very different from our expectations. And have you ever been in a situation where something totally unexpected happened, changing the course of events in a way previously unimaginable? Share here in the comments your experience, opinion, or feeling about this episode, or something similar that has marked you. Your participation is essential for this space to continue growing and bringing stories that leave us reflecting on the world around us. If this topic makes sense to you, leave a like on the video and show everyone that you like content that mixes suspense, humor, and life lessons. Every like, comment, and subscription on the channel helps spread these amazing stories, making more people can be surprised and learn something new. After all, here we believe that learning from real stories makes everything lighter and more fun. So be sure to subscribe to stay on top of everything that's coming. There are many amazing stories yet to come, and your participation is what makes this channel grow and reach more and more people who love a good dose of emotion and reflection. Stay with me, because the best is yet to come. It was a hot afternoon in Texas, and the sun seemed to burn even harder as the air carried a sense of calm that contrasted with the intense rush that was going on at that time. The heat reflected from the sidewalk, from the windows of the buildings, and even from the trees that, even under this scorching weather, remained green and full of life. In this typical summer setting, a man ran desperately through the streets of Dallas, his quick steps echoing through the empty sidewalks as he nervously looked back, desperately searching for a way out. He had just committed a robbery, a decision that, at that moment, seemed to have been the most wrong of his entire life. Adrenaline pulsed strong in his veins, and every breath was heavy, almost as if the weight of the consequences was crushing him. The escape, which initially seemed like a clever strategy, soon turned out to be a trap. With his heart racing, he headed down a route he knew little about, trying to hide in the area of an abandoned park, a space that seemed forgotten by everyone. It was a place that few frequented, a silent relic in the middle of the city, taken over by tall trees, thick bushes, and a vegetation that grew uncontrollably. Those trees, which seemed to protect the silence of the place, hid ancient secrets, as if keeping stories of bygone times. The criminal, without realizing it, entered that landscape that looked like something out of a thriller scene. His quickened steps caused the sound of his boots to echo through the room, mixing with the singing of birds and the rustling of leaves in the wind. As he advanced, his attention was focused on evading the police, who were still chasing him a short distance away. The sound of sirens and police voice commands echoing in the background created an atmosphere of increasing tension. He didn't think twice as he entered that space that looked like an isolated island in the middle of the city. For him, it was the last hope of hiding, a makeshift refuge where he could think about his next move. But in the midst of all that wild vegetation, something unexpected awaited him. An ancient tree with thick branches and dense leaves had a secret hidden under its crowns. It was an ordinary tree at first glance, but its lower part hid something that would change the course of that escape in a way that no one could have predicted. What the criminal did not know was that at that moment, he was at a real crossroads with nature. His footsteps and the vibration caused by the intense race caused the silence of the park to be broken unexpectedly. A subtle, barely perceptible sound began to spread through the leaves and branches, gradually growing in intensity. It was the beginning of a reaction that had everything to become a real natural tragedy. The vibration generated by the accelerated escape was enough to disturb a huge nest of marimbondos that, hidden under the leaves of that ancient tree, awaited its moment of defense. As soon as they were disturbed, the normally silent and harmless marimbondos turned into a furious mass, a cloud of venom and aggressiveness that came out towards the man in an explosion of fury and destruction. The impact was immediate. The sound of stings, the desperate movement of the criminal trying to protect himself, and the reaction of insects created a scene of chaos that seemed almost surreal. Man, who until a few moments ago seemed invincible in his escape, found himself completely vulnerable before that force of nature. He dropped the gun, which fell to the ground with a metallic sound as he tried to move away, covered with stings. Their cries of pain echoed throughout the park, mingling with the incessant hum of the angry marimbondos. The scene was as quick as it was brutal, leaving everyone who watched it speechless. At that moment, the police chase, which was still approaching from the perimeter, witnessed something that no one could have imagined. The police arrived in time to see the man, covered in stings, staggering as he tried to escape from that real hell of marimbondos. The scene went viral in a matter of minutes, with locals passing by capturing it all in videos that soon spread across social media. The images showed a desperate man, covered in insects, trying to protect himself, while nature took revenge in a way few could have imagined. This story has become a symbol of instant karma, a lesson that sometimes nature itself has its own plans for justice, which can be as unpredictable as life itself. And while the criminal was finally arrested, covered in stings and with visible marks of his escape, the narrative of that episode seemed to be just beginning to reveal its deepest layers. The impact of that scene on society was enormous, prompting people to reflect on the decisions they make, on the impact of their actions, and even on how full life is of hidden revelations, which can come from where you least expect them. The story of that man became a lesson in transformation, decision, and how often the universe conspires in mysterious ways to put everything in its place. But what happened next, behind the scenes of that story, still holds many revelations that can change the way we understand this journey, this relationship between man and nature, and above all, how the hidden truth manifests itself in the most unexpected hours. The man was still panting, his body tired and covered in stings, but his mind remained focused in the hope of escaping from this absurd situation. He believed that if he managed to hide in some hidden corner of the park, the chase would end there, and he could pretend that nothing had happened. The adrenaline still pulsed strongly, and his hand trembled, tightly gripping the weapon that fortunately still remained in his possession despite all the confusion. Every step he took felt like a struggle against his own body and against the fear that intensified with every second. He knew that the police were right behind him, with their sirens cutting the silence of the park, and this only increased his sense of real danger, that at any moment he could be surrounded and captured. Residents watching from the windows of their homes or their cars, some with cell phones in hand, captured the desperate man's every move. Footage quickly spread across social media, showing the scene of a cowering fugitive surrounded by tall trees as a silent crowd followed closely. The tension was palpable. Every second felt like an eternity, The people watching knew they were witnessing something beyond a simple police capture. It was a demonstration of how the situation can transform from something controllable to an almost cinematic experience, where real danger and vulnerability meet in a way that no one can ignore. He tried to hide behind a tree, hiding among the branches and scattered leaves, looking for a loophole to escape. But his presence there did not go unnoticed. The policemen, who were already at strategic points, approached cautiously, every step meticulous, attentive to any suspicious movement. The tension increased, and the fear of being surrounded, or worse, of being hit by a firearm, began to take hold of him. His breathing quickened as he realized that the situation was spiraling out of control, that his escape, which seemed like a momentary victory, had actually made room for a life-and-death chase. The surrounding scenery seemed a mixture of silence and chaos. The residents with their cell phones recorded everything, while the police officers moved in tense silence, each with his hand in his holster, ready to act at any sign of threat. That scene had become a spectacle of impact, where the real danger was mixed with the feeling of helplessness and the certainty that at that moment, time was an implacable enemy. The criminal, hoping to escape, walked with hesitant steps, aware that at any moment everything could end there in that abandoned park, among trees and shadows. And as the chase went on, his every movement was watched with attention by those who happened to be there or out of curiosity. The atmosphere seemed charged with an energy that no one could fully explain, as if the universe was conspiring for that episode to take an even more dramatic turn. The combination of fear, hope, danger, and the constant presence of the police created a narrative of impact, a story that would be marked in the memory of those who followed closely. Behind the scenes of that moment reveals something that goes beyond the simple act of running away, a lesson in how wrong decisions can turn into a chain of unpredictable events, where life and death can be separated by a thin thread of luck or bad luck. Now I want to go even deeper into this matter, because what seemed like an ordinary escape turned into a real test of endurance, courage, and even transformation. Against this backdrop of chaos, every detail reveals a hidden truth about what it takes to cope with the impact of our own decisions, and how far one criminal's journey can teach us about the power of change, repentance, and the understanding that, all too often, the universe quietly conspires to put everything in its place. These revelations, which seem to appear out of nowhere, are actually the backstage of a story that shows us that deep down, we are all part of a great cycle of actions and consequences, where true transformation happens when we recognize our mistakes and learn to move forward, more aware and prepared for the challenges that life has in store for us. At that moment, the criminal, overcome by despair and haste, decided that the best way out was to run towards a tree that stood nearby, a choice that seemed rational in his frightened mind. Without even realizing it, he passed under a thick branch, almost instinctively, believing that that shadow and that shelter could offer some kind of protection. But what he didn't know was that at the top of that seemingly ordinary tree, there was something that would forever change the course of that story. A colossal nest of marimbondos, built with patience and frightening care, lay dormant, hidden among the highest leaves and branches. That nest, which most of the time looked like just a formation of intertwined branches, had a peculiarity that few noticed. Its silent presence was a real trap. The marimbondos, who usually remain silent, protecting their home with an almost defensive posture, were there motionless, waiting for the moment to act. Only at that instant, the vibration caused by the man's accelerated running was enough to break the calm of that hiding place. A small, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the branches and caused the nest to tremble slightly, signaling something that no one could have imagined, the chain reaction of a real explosion of fury. It was as if a silent bomb had been activated. The marimbondos, awakened from their protective sleep, came out of the nest aggressively, forming a cloud of angry insects that quickly spread through the environment. Their presence was frightening, a dark mass that moved with impressive speed, seeking to protect itself and attack at the same time. To the criminal, that move seemed like something from another world, a force of nature that turned against him in a brutal way. He, who had hitherto thought himself invincible in his escape, suddenly realized that he was facing something far greater than he could control. The vibration that caused him to run towards the tree was a kind of trigger, a hidden truth up there that he could never imagine. The marimbondos, aroused and enraged, began to attack with ferocity, their well-aimed stings finding the man's body mercilessly. It was an instant of absolute chaos. The noise of the insects buzzing, added to the cry of pain of the criminal, created a scene that seemed out of a nightmare. His movements, desperate, tried to get away from the cloud of insects, but each sting seemed to deepen his suffering. The weapon fell from his hands, and he tried to protect himself with his arms, but the amount of stinging was so much that the pain began to overwhelm his entire body. What seemed like a quick and clever escape turned into a natural tragedy. The marimbondos, moved by a force that seemed almost instinctive, became a weapon of justice of nature itself. The man, covered in stings, staggered, screaming in pain as he desperately tried to get away from the nest. His body, already visibly scarred by the attacks, showed the impact of a decision that, in haste, was a fatal mistake. The scene, which once seemed like an ordinary persecution, turned into a battle between man and an invisible force, a kind of punishment that came from the very environment around him. And that's where everything takes on a deeper and more revealing dimension. Because many times, in the rush to flee, to escape the consequences, or to try to erase a wrong action, we end up putting ourselves in situations that seem inescapable. That moment was a turning point, a lesson that reveals how vulnerability can be hidden behind an impulsive decision, an act of desperation. Nature, with her silent strength, has shown that despite our arrogance or our desire for control, she always has a way of imposing herself, of collecting her bills directly and without mercy. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because this story reveals a hidden truth that many prefer to ignore. The decisions we make in a hurry can lead to an impact we never imagined. That man, as he ran desperately, did not know that as he passed by he was about to become the victim of a natural punishment that, in its essence, had everything to do with his own error of judgment. The speed and lack of attention created a chain of events that ultimately exposed a vulnerability that few are able to realize at the time. The force of nature is often a powerful metaphor for our own limitations and the impact our actions can have on our life journey. This revelation, which seems almost philosophical, leads us to reflect on how true transformation happens when we stop to understand the impact of our decisions. Every choice, no matter how quick or impulsive, carries with it a consequence that often only reveals itself at the most unexpected moment. And at the same time, this story reminds us that no matter how hard we try to flee or hide our actions, the hidden truth always finds a way to surface, whether in the form of natural karma, a hard lesson, or a deeply transforming experience. Thus, what seemed like a simple episode of persecution becomes a powerful metaphor for how the impact of our decisions can teach us about resilience, change, and the importance of being aware of the small vibrations that, in the end, reveal a whole hidden truth. In a matter of seconds, the silence of the park was broken by an explosion of fury that no one could have predicted. The cloud of marimbondos, which initially seemed a controllable threat, became the protagonist of a scene of absolute chaos. Hundreds of insects, agitated and determined to protect their home, descended in a living, pulsating mass, forming a storm of stings that invaded every corner of the man's body. His attempt to escape or to protect himself turned into a desperate fight against that avalanche of angry insects. His face, which once carried an expression of fear and determination, now showed a mixture of pain, surprise, and helplessness. He dropped the weapon with an abrupt movement, almost as if the very force of nature had taken over his body, leaving him completely vulnerable. The stings began to accumulate, reaching the neck, arms, back, and even the face in a quick and relentless sequence. Each sting felt like a stab of pain, a brutal reminder that life itself sometimes puts us in front of a reality we don't control. His movements became uncoordinated, his skin filled with red marks, and his breathing became increasingly difficult as he struggled on the ground, trying to ward off the insects that gave no respite. The scene reached a level of intensity that felt almost cinematic. The silence of before was replaced by a deafening hum, an orchestra of insects that attacked without mercy. The man, who until a few seconds seemed invincible in his escape, now exhibited a raw vulnerability, a defeat that seemed inevitable. Her screams of pain echoed through the park, mingling with the sound of persistent stinging as she desperately tried to protect herself with her arms. But the amount of marimbondos was so much that every attempt to escape seemed futile. His skin, which had once hoped to escape, now showed signs of a losing battle. The force of the attack was so intense that it seemed that the environment itself conspired against him. His movements of attempted defense were slow, almost in slow motion, while the insects, moved by a collective force, surrounded him on all sides. The stings did not stop, and each one seemed a mark of a lesson he did not want to learn, that nature, with its silent strength, always finds a way to collect what is due. The scene became a mixture of pain and tragedy, a clear demonstration that arrogance and error of judgment can turn an escape into a lesson in humility. At this moment, every detail seemed amplified, as if the universe was watching a spectacle of inevitable consequences. That man, who a few moments ago was trying to escape the law, now found himself the victim of a greater force, a natural punishment that he himself had provoked by passing there unsuspecting. The stings, which looked like a puncture of justice, left visible marks on the skin, and his body trembled, exhausted, as he tried to get away from that angry swarm. Pain, fear, and surprise mingled in a seemingly endless combination, revealing a hidden truth. Sometimes our most impulsive actions can put us on the path to a transformation we never imagined, an experience that forces us to reflect on the impact of decisions we make at the right time or the wrong time. This intensity reveals something fundamental. The journey of any person is marked by choices, many of them made in haste or despair, and that can lead us to moments of deep learning. The moment the man struggles to the ground, covered in stings, it becomes clear that life is not just a matter of running away or fighting, but of understanding the impact of each decision, no matter how simple or complex it may seem. And while that scene is a powerful metaphor for how nature quietly manages to collect its bills, it also serves to remind us that, on our journey, transformation happens precisely when we are faced with our vulnerability, with the hidden truth that we often prefer to ignore. Because deep down, everything that seemed like a simple escape has become a lesson in humility, that the universe conspires to put us back in our place, often in a painful but always revealing way. The strength of the marimbondos, which at the time seemed an unfair punishment, actually brought a deeper reflection. Our actions have an impact, and our true strength lies in how we react to the adversities that arise precisely when we least expect it. It is there in pain and vulnerability that we find an opportunity for transformation, to learn to respect the natural cycles of life, and to understand that, often, the hidden truth reveals itself in the most painful, but also the most enlightening way. And that, in a way, is part of our growth, whether it's in the journey of a criminal, a hero, or someone who happens to be going through times of crisis. The police officers who accompanied the chase, when they arrived at the scene, stood still, almost static, in front of a scene that seemed to come out of a comedy movie, although it was, in fact, a life-or-death situation. They had seen the criminal flee, heard his cries of pain, and even witnessed his desperate attempt to escape. But now it had all turned into a spectacle of natural justice that no one could have foreseen. The scene of a man covered in stings, staggering and trying to get away from a cloud of angry insects, was so surreal that it seemed like an illustration of a universe that sometimes likes to play with our own actions. It was as if all his arrogance, his attempt to escape, and his impulsive decision had actually been preparation for this moment of punishment. The police, who until then had been attentive to every movement, realized that this was something beyond the ordinary. There was no need to fire a weapon, to use physical force, or to make any violent intervention. The force of nature itself, with its silent and relentless force, had done what they could hardly do with traditional methods. The criminal, who minutes before seemed so invincible in his escape, now showed himself totally vulnerable, the victim of a justice that knows no mercy and that acts in an almost ironic way. They stood there, watching with a mixture of surprise and respect, as nature had assumed the role of vigilante at that instant. For police officers, it was a reminder that not everything in life can be controlled by weapons or human strategies. Sometimes, life itself teaches us that there are forces that escape our understanding, and that justice, no matter how hard we try to define its limits, ends up manifesting itself in often unexpected ways. The scene, which felt like a comedy of errors, carried a powerful message that our actions and decisions have an impact, and that, at the right time, the universe conspires to put everything in its place, even if in a way that no one could have imagined. The irony of that moment was as evident as its beauty. A man who tried to evade the law ended up being overcome by a force that he could not foresee, a force that came from his own environment, from his own life, from a hidden truth that was revealed there definitively. As the officers stood there watching that scene almost without action, they couldn't help but ponder what it meant. Natural justice, which is often hidden behind our choices and actions, had manifested itself clearly and definitively. And it all reinforced the idea that, in anyone's journey, decisions have a profound impact, many of them carrying a consequence that only reveals itself at the most unexpected moment. That episode, now marked by deep irony, has turned into a living example that the universe somehow always finds a way to balance things, to make the hidden truth come to light, even if in a way that no one imagines. The policemen, when they saw the man covered with stings, understood that there in that instant life itself had given a lesson in humility and respect for the invisible forces that govern the universe. They knew that often what seems like a momentary defeat can actually be a silent victory of a greater understanding. The scene reinforced that in the end, our actions shape our own story, and that the impact of an impulsive decision can turn into a revelation that will carry lifelong learning. Thus, that episode marked not only a physical defeat, but a lesson that the truest justice is the one that comes from within, from a force that is not seen, but that manifests itself at the most precise moment, when we least expect it. The scene, which until a few minutes seemed confined to the silence of the park, quickly became public thanks to the witnesses who were nearby. Residents who observed everything from their windows, from their balconies, or who passed by the place with their cell phones in hand, did not miss the opportunity to record that unique moment. Within minutes, videos began circulating on social networks, showing in detail the scene of the desperate man, covered in stings trying to escape from that cloud of angry insects. The speed with which the images spread was impressive, causing the episode to turn into a true phenomenon of national reach, going viral in a matter of hours and gaining the interest of thousands of internet users. What drew attention was the way these recordings captured not only the visual impact, but also the essence of the moment. Displays of despair, of pain, of helplessness. All this combined with images of a force of nature acting so directly and ruthlessly. These witnesses, often unintentionally, became part of a chain of disclosure that gave the episode a dimension that transcended the simple fact of a thwarted escape. Social networks, with their global reach, made the episode gain notoriety, baptizing it as instant karma, an expression that, in fact, synthesized the feeling that, somehow, justice had been done right there, in that instant, in an almost symbolic way. The relevance of this story extended beyond Dallas, reaching other states and even countries. People from different regions began to talk about the episode, not only for its unusual character, but also for the impact it brought to those who followed it closely. After all, it's hard not to be struck by the force of nature sent by surprise, the speed with which it acts, and the implicit message that our actions, however impulsive or inconsequential, carry consequences that can manifest in ways we never imagined. The videos, which showed that man fighting insects, quickly became references in debates about responsibility, respect for life, and the importance of being attentive to our decisions. What stood out, too, was the authority these recordings conferred on the episode. They served as visual proof that the impact of an impulsive action, no matter how insignificant it may seem at the time, can turn into a lesson that is marked in the collective memory. And in a way, these images helped humanize that moment, showing that no one is immune to the forces that surround us and the consequences they can bring. From the record of these witnesses, the episode gained a narrative of its own, which is strengthened in the authenticity of what was captured and in the relevance that experiences like this, as bizarre as they are also part of our learning journey. If we think about it, this chain of records demonstrates that the hidden truth often reveals itself in the simplest details, but which carry an immense impact. The videos went viral, not only for their drama, but for their ability to connect people with a fundamental lesson. The universe has a way of showing us, in different ways, that our actions have weight, and that often we only realize this when everything has already happened. These images have become a mirror of the impact that our decisions, impulses, or carelessness can generate, reinforcing the idea that true transformation begins in the awareness that we are all subject to the invisible forces that govern our journey. The The strength of these recordings also reinforces an important aspect of our relationship with the world around us, the responsibility to be mindful of our actions, even in the rush of everyday life. Each video, each record, reinforces a lesson that goes beyond the episode itself. It talks about the impact of our choices and the importance of reflecting before acting. After all, the story of Dallas, with its stunning imagery, makes it clear that the hidden truth often manifests in very creative ways, and that our journey is marked by these moments of revelation. And the most interesting thing is that all this was captured by ordinary people who witnessed an episode of instant karma and, by sharing their images, helped turn an isolated situation into a universal lesson. When the swarm finally dispersed, what remained was a scene of defeat and inevitable consequences. The man, who until a few moments had found himself invincible in his escape, now lay on the ground covered with stings, completely defeated by the silent and implacable force of nature. His movements were slow, almost instinctive, as he tried to move away from the cloud of angry insects that still buzzed around him. Each sting seemed like a punishment that he himself had provoked by passing by without realizing the danger that lurked under the trees. The skin, marked by red marks and inflammations, reflected the intensity of his vulnerability in the face of a side effect that no one could imagine. The police, who watched everything closely, were not slow to act. As soon as the threat of the marimbondos calmed down, they stormed into space, quickly surrounding the incapacitated man. The arrest scene was swift, but loaded with a clear message. Impulsive actions, however bold they may seem, carry a weight that cannot be ignored. The criminal, now covered in stings, was carefully immobilized, while his cries of pain still echoed, mixed with the silence of a moment that seemed like forced reflection. The police collected the abandoned weapon, recovered the stolen money, and without letting any details escape, closed that landmark episode. That sequence of events made it clear that, as much as it seemed like a well-planned escape, it had all been the result of a chain of decisions that culminated in his own defeat. The impact of that episode was so strong that it became a symbol that life often presents us with punishments that we cannot foresee. A simple race for freedom, driven by fear and irresponsibility, has turned into a lesson that our actions have direct consequences and that sometimes they come from where we least expect them. The force of nature, which seemed only an element of the scenario, turned out to be an ally in justice, an invisible force that makes a point of exacting its share without mercy. The image of the man lying on the ground covered with stings became a lesson in transformation, because we often only realize the impact of our decisions when we face the consequences, in fact. That episode left a mark on society, reinforcing the importance of reflecting before acting impulsively. Every choice, no matter how simple or desperate it may seem at the time, carries a hidden truth. It can turn into the very force that makes us rethink, learn, and go on a new journey. And this narrative, which mixes elements of natural justice and inevitable consequences, serves as a warning that life has its own balancing mechanisms, which act silently but with a precision that few can understand at the time. If you think about it, it was all a kind of forced transformation, a lesson that came abruptly and directly. The impact of that moment echoed in the minds of those who followed, reinforcing the idea that our decisions, made in a hurry or without attention, can put us in borderline situations where it only remains to accept the weight of our own actions. The outcome of this story shows that even in adversity, there is a hidden truth that always reveals itself, that life, with its silent strength, manages, in mysterious ways, to balance everything that we try to escape or hide. And in the end, what remains is the certainty that the impact of our choices is something we carry with us for the entire journey, shaping our story in ways that we often only understand when it's too late to change. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject that seems simple at first glance, but which carries a wealth of occult teachings. This story reveals something we often overlook: the strength of our decisions and the impact they can have on our life trajectory, often in ways we didn't realize at the time. What happened in that park, with the criminal and the marimbondos, is a powerful metaphor for how life works. We often believe that we are in control, that we can escape the consequences of our actions, but the hidden truth is that the universe has its own mechanisms of justice that go beyond our rational understanding. These revelations invite us to reflect on what it really means to take responsibility for our choices. When we think about the trajectory of that man, we see that it all started with an impulsive decision to run away, to try to escape the law or responsibility. This decision, which seemed like a smart strategy at the time, turned out to be the trigger for a chain of events that he could never control. It is as if, in his haste to escape, he has awakened forces that were dormant and that at their core carry a message of balance and justice. History, in a symbolic way, shows us that our actions, no matter how small or fast, leave a mark that sooner or later manifests itself in one way or another. And often, this manifestation comes loaded with a hidden truth that we only realize when it is too late to turn back. The transformation that happens within each of us often goes through moments like this, where pain, fear, or regret become catalysts for a new mindset. That episode, as unusual as it sounds, teaches us that the journey of growth is directly related to recognizing our vulnerabilities and understanding that our decisions shape our story. It's not just a matter of punishment or karma, but an opportunity to see beyond what the surface reveals. It is the chance to discover, behind the scenes of our own life, the true reasons that lead us to act in certain ways and thus understand the profound impact that our attitudes can generate in our trajectory of evolution. When we reflect on all this, we realize that the impact of those stings goes far beyond physical pain. They represent a lesson in humility, in respect for the forces that operate silently around us and within ourselves. These forces, often invisible, guide a kind of balance that, if ignored, can make us pay a high price for our impulsive actions. The impact of that situation is proof that life has a way of putting us back in our place, and that, for the most part, it does so subtly but extremely effectively. And it is exactly at this point that history connects with who we are and what we can become. Because no matter what we do, true transformation happens in how we learn to deal with our own vulnerabilities. Every impulsive decision, every mistake made in a hurry, are like seeds that, if not well cultivated with reflection, can generate consequences that teach us, definitively, the importance of a more conscious mentality. These revelations show us that the impact of our actions is a hidden truth that only reveals itself at the right time, and that this moment can be a watershed moment in our journey of self-knowledge and growth. And understanding all this, it becomes clear that the story of that man is not just an isolated narrative, but a universal reflection. A lesson that life, with its silent wisdom, always finds a way to balance the forces we create, whether through an unexpected punishment, an experience that makes us rethink, or a revelation that awakens us to a new mindset. The important thing is that we learn to see beyond appearances. The impact that our decisions carry is a hidden truth that only manifests at the right time, and it is up to each of us to be attentive to capture these messages and turn obstacles into opportunities for evolution. Thus, what seemed like a simple escape or a momentary mistake becomes an opportunity to truly understand the essence of who we are and what we can become along our journey. If you have come this far, it is because you really wanted to reflect on everything that has been shared. Perhaps this story of the criminal, natural karma and the lessons that life gives us has touched some important point for you. In this space, we know that learning is a continuous process, and each episode we live brings an opportunity to see beyond appearances. So if this message made sense, leave your comment saying that I'm with you until the end, or something that shows that this reflection resonated around. This helps a lot to strengthen this connection that we build here with each story and each learning. Oh, and if you liked the content, a like on the video comes very naturally as a way to show that you appreciate this type of reflection. After all, our growth journey is made up of small actions that, when added together, make all the difference. Here, our idea is always to bring themes that invite you to think and evolve in a light and unhurried way. There is a video here on the side that complements this subject well. Click and continue with me there, so we can further explore these stories and these teachings that life offers us. Thank you for being with me until the end. Until the next episode, and remember, learning never stops.